2002 rolls around. You're 37 years old, and you get released from prison. And you end up doing, about 11 years?
Well, 12 total.
12 total. So you pretty much missed out on all the 90s.
That is correct. I didn't even know what a computer was at the time.
Right. So now you get out. What's that first day like?
Well, as I describe it in the book, when I walked through the doors into the outside, the greatest thing that hit me was the smell, the difference of the smell in the air. It was like a dark cloud that sat over that prison. I mean, seriously, with this stench. And when I walked out through those doors of that prison and away from that, it was like smelling fresh laundry, if you will. It was the weirdest sense that I ever experienced in my life. And that's the best I can explain it. It was that intense.
Well, you get out, you start working a construction job. But then 9 years later, 2011, after being on the run for 16 years, 12 years on the FBI most wanted fugitives list, they end up finding Whitey Bulger in Santa Monica.
Yeah, but prior to that, as you said, I was working, I get into the construction, the union. Mm-hmm. And it was the best thing I did because I did it because I made a conscious decision, a smart decision, because I knew from Tony Cardinelli, and as a matter of fact, when I came home, he sat me down to talk to me about it and said, the deck is stacked against you. They're waiting for you. The FBI and everyone else is waiting for you. They believe that when you come home, that you're going to step back into it and take things over. I had a long time. I knew that. I thought ahead of time. I knew they would be waiting for me. And I'm going to tell you something. I knew going back to that life that I would never, ever, there's no chance of me to succeed because there's so many informants. There's so many rats. There are so many of them. There's no way to succeed. So I wasn't going to be another feather in a rat's hat or a federal agent's hat. Either one of them. I was not going to be a feather in their hat ever again. I made that decision. And I went into, I had choices in different unions I could have went into in Boston. And I decided to go into the laborers union in the Irish local. I was accepted. And I was extremely grateful for that because that was the changing of my life at that time and stepping back and not getting back into that world. Though I could have very easily. But I made a conscious decision because I was never going to be a stepping stone for the FBI, the DEA, or any snitch. That said, I went into the construction, and I got a call as I came home, because it was right after I came home from prison. As a matter of fact, when I was coming home from prison, I get a call. Hey, Mark Wahlberg wants to meet you. He's interested in your story. I said, really? So I thought about it. He wanted to come see me in prison. I declined the visit, by the way. So I said, let me think about it. So I hashed it around with some friends and people, because I've never said a word about, my life or anything like that. I said, let me think about it. I said, okay, let's meet up. So I met Mark. I met Mark Wahlberg. We talked.
Another Boston guy, by the way.
Yeah, another great Boston guy. And he said, why don't you come out to L.A.? So I did. Went out to L.A. At the time, it was the Endeavor agency.
Mhm.
And Ari ran it. And Mark says, I think this guy's got a great story. I want to make something of it. But first, we got to do the book. That's the best way to go. Do the book. So I went into at the time, the book agent for Endeavor. His name is Brian Lipson, who's still my agent today with another company. And Ari calls him, brings me up, brings up Steve Levinson, Mark Wahlberg's right-hand man. He said, what do you think? What do you think? And he goes, is it sellable? Ari says. Brian Lipson says, oh yeah, it's sellable. So we did the book. The book came out and it became a New York Times bestseller. I'm very proud of that. This is a changing of my life.
Congrats.
I took a dark cloud and I made that silver lining into this book, which changed my life. And I say that there are a lot of other stand-up guys out there that should do the same thing, that they can change your lives too after a dark time. There's always a silver lining. So that said, I wrote the book on how to be a man and how to accept your responsibility without giving anybody up in life and doing the right thing. I can walk down any street and hold my head high. When my name's mentioned in Boston, Red Shea, you know what comes behind that? Solid guy. Solid guy. But yet, if you mentioned a rat's name, you know what comes behind their name? A rat. A rat. Just like a lot of guys you had on. And I know you got a great form, and you know what? I'm not knocking you by any means, but I'm knocking the guys that you had on, personally. Borrello, Arulada, Sammy the Bull. No good. They got an excuse for everything. And especially that Gene. That Gene, he's got a big mouth. When I see him on your interview, I didn't like him at all. And they got an excuse for everything. And they like to say, oh, this guy, he was a stand-up guy, but he's talking about, like Joey Molino, talking about Joey. And Joey's a solid guy, and he's a friend of mine. There's not many guys like me and Joey. We're solid guys. And sometimes we speak for the guys who are still inside that don't have a voice, that are solid. And another thing, on my Instagram, I have guys that have done time, and they said, thank you, Mr. Shea, for your book, because it helped me get through my time as a man. That book is for men who want to continue to be men. Their books are for rats and teach them how to rat.
I mean, the interesting thing is when I interview guys who cooperate, there's always a reason. So, for example, when I interviewed Sammy the Bull, and he said, well, I would have done 100 years for John Gotti, but then I heard the tape that he was going to turn against me and so forth, and that's why I turned on him. Let me just finish. So my follow-up question was, well, okay, I understand why you testified against John Gotti, but then you took the stand against a bunch of other mob bosses who never turned on you. What's the reason for that? He goes, well, I wasn't the only person who cooperated against them, and there was other witnesses and so forth. So there's always a great reason to cooperate.
Exactly, and that's my point. And that said, on my case, he said, oh, John was talking bad about me. And John, he was. I know, because Tony Cardinelli was on that case, the Gotti case, and he cross-examined that piece of shit, okay? But that said, I had guys in my case, when I listened to, that worked for me. When I listened to those tapes, they were laughing because I had that problem in Florida. Maybe you should have got shot or whatever. Why? Because they were jealous. People, you can't help jealousy in life. People are jealous. They become jealous, and jealousy is a bad thing.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, that's what I learned. Now, they talked bad about me, and I heard these tapes. Should I turn and be a rat because they talk bad about me? No, I'll handle you at the appropriate time when the time comes as the man I am. Well, maybe he should have fucking did that with John Gotti.